Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, the Bucktool 2x48 grinder. Big deal or big mistake? The answer may surprise you. Okay, so today I'm going to be reviewing the Bucktool 2x48 belt grinder. Now, I'm a knife maker, so I'm going to talk about it from that perspective, but I'll try to give a flavor of, the general use of the tool too, so that people who are looking at this from the perspective of a woodworker or metal fab, that sort of thing, can also get some insight into this machine. As with most of my reviews, I don't receive a nickel from the manufacturer, but I do get the tool for free, so make of that what you will. In that vein, link down there in the description if you want to pick up a copy of one of these yourself. A little sliver of that will go to helping the channel. So make of that what you will. Now, here's the thing. I've owned, I think, 3, maybe even 4 Bucktool grinders. I didn't really want to like them. But I did actually end up kind of liking them. In this case, I really wanted to like it and ended up with some very serious reservations about it. So let's get into it. Starting with the basics, this is a 2x48 belt grinder, meaning that the belt that it runs is 2 inches wide and 48 inches long. Unlike many budget-friendly grinders, this is only a belt grinder. There's no disc grinder or arbor on the other side, nothing like that. It just does one thing. It has a 1 horsepower motor that runs at 3,450 RPM, which yields a fairly sporty 4,800 feet per minute of belt speed. On that front, it is a 1-speed model. On or off, that's all it does. There's also an interchangeable tool rest, this right here, and there's a dust port down here, or there would be if I had it all fully assembled. Whatever, it's got a nice sturdy cast iron base that can be bolted to a bench or to some kind of stand. Price at the time of this video, $349 cash American. All right, let's talk about operation. Like I said, the machine articulates so you can grind like this or this. 99% of knife makers will set it this way and leave it. To me, the contact wheel down here might be useful for metal fabricators, but really it's of limited value to knife makers, and we'll get into that a little bit deeper later. What that means is that most knife makers will primarily be using the flat platen. You'll notice this gray thing here, that's a graphite platen cover. Every time you touch it, it looks like you've just been putting your finger on pencil lead, because basically you have. It's there to help your belt run cooler, as well as to reduce belt bump that occurs as the joint of your belt bumps over the platen. This will work fine for a while, then it'll wear out or fall off. There's nothing wrong with that, but honestly not much value there. Tracking knob here. This is probably the best tracking knob I've seen on a grinder in this class, by which I mean it actually moves the belt side to side more than a millimeter. To remove the belt, you open the panel. Thank you, OSHA, for requiring annoying and dangerous quote-unquote safety features on grinders that will actually just cut your fingers off if you get them caught in them. Anyway, I digress. Once you actually get the panel open, belt removal, quite easy and intuitive. Pull this handle to loosen the belt, take out the old belt, pop in the new one, handle down, ready to rock. Once you get past the door, it's about as easy a belt change as you'll find anywhere. Now, for most knife makers, this little tool rest for sharpening drill bits and stuff might as well go straight in the trash. Also comes with a little work table, and the operating word here is little. More on that later. Quick pitch here. If you've been enjoying this channel over the years as I bring you videos about gear, saving money, making better knives, and knife making builds, I'd invite you to jump in and help the channel. How to do it? Patreon. Those of you who help out on Patreon will not only be supporting me so that I can make more and better videos, but you'll get access to plans for most of my builds, as well as access to me if you got questions about the craft of knife making. Patreon.com/Walter Sorrells. Okay, now I said that I wanted to like it, and the reason for that is that at this price, you know, I haven't tried every single belt grinder on planet Earth, but I mean, this is the most powerful grinder that I'm aware of in this kind of general budget arena. Most of the budget belt grinders out there, I'm not going to say they're toys, but they're fairly underpowered for knife making. They're easy to stall out, and this is not like that. I mean, from a power perspective, this is kind of a big boy machine. And there are not many of them at this price point that you could say that about. Okay, now, I said I had some reservations about this grinder. Let's get into them. First, as I said, it's a one-speed machine. Speed controls cost money. Bucktool is trying to keep this in the budget-friendly realm, and I guess that's a sacrifice they had to make. Fair enough. You know, it is what it is. But I will say this belt is smoking along here, and that is a blessing and a curse. It does mean that you can remove a lot of stock with it, especially if you've got a real heavy belt like, you know, 36 grit or something like that. I mean, you can really make a lot of chips with this thing. However, novices will probably find this somewhat difficult to control. So, you know, it's a 6 of one, half dozen the other. Okay, second reservation, this right here, the work table. Couple things knife makers use tables for. First, profiling their knives. It's a little small to adequately support the work, but okay, you can live with it. The other thing though, supporting a grinding jig. Here I'm using my Sorrells brick, which for good or ill is probably the most compact grinding jig on planet Earth. Now I made it work here, but it'd be easy to let it fall off the side and jack up your knife in a big way. Bottom line, this table's just too small for knife makers. So that means if you want to use this for knife making, you'll want to mod it immediately by installing a larger table. Fortunately, this is basically a matter of buying a piece of steel at Home Depot, drilling and tapping a couple holes, and you're good to go. Still, 2 more inches on each side of the table, tool rest, whatever you want to call it, would have made it way more useful without driving up the price too much. Okay, so problem 3. Let's take a look at this little contact wheel right here. It's got a nice serrated wheel, which makes for smooth, cool grinding. However, if you want to make a knife on here, you need sufficient clearance to move the knife back and forth. Now, as you'll see, this wheel is kind of recessed behind the body of the motor and this little casting that holds the belt assembly. And what that means is that if you're trying to grind a knife, you run into this thing. If you're doing stuff vertically, it's great, and there are a lot of applications where that's what you would be doing. But if you're trying to hollow grind a knife or something like that where you're going side to side, it just doesn't work. Okay, but here is by far the biggest reservation about this grinder. So this right here is the platen, this flat surface here, and you can grind all along here. This is what it looked like when I got the grinder, and here it is now. See the difference? Yeah, I took off the annoying safety guard, sure, but the big change is this. I milled these 2 notches in here. Now, on most belt grinders, I got a ton of belt grinders back in my grinding room. Most belt grinders, the platen is the exact same width as the belt, give or take. That's not the case here. This entire assembly is one big casting, and I guess, you know, for whatever reason, in trying to make it sufficiently rigid or give room for the wheels that are required here. I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, this platen it's got a 1/2 inch sticking out on each side. Now, if you're just grinding along the face, that doesn't matter. But when you start trying to grind behind this thing, you're gonna slap into the sides of this platen, and that just makes it, you're just incapable of doing certain kinds of things. For instance, if you're trying to grind the interior surface of a knife, I'm trying to think if I got one. Yeah. So if you're grinding this part of the knife, you don't need to get around the back side here. You don't need any relief behind the platen. However, if you're trying to get into this interior curve here, what happens is it slaps into the edges of the platen here. So what I did is I actually went and I milled this entire thing out. This is a very sturdy casting. It's a very heavy piece of cast iron. And my guess, and there's not a ton of stress on it. Basically, it's just got to hold up this wheel, and there's a little spring in here that's pushing this. It's very sturdily made, and so I was able to mill out this area on both sides and give myself sufficient room that I can work behind it. Everybody's not going to want to go to that trouble. Most people, you buy a grinder, you want to take it out of the box and start making stuff with it immediately. In this case, not so easy to do that. So that's a big deal. As you can see from some of the B-roll of me making stuff on here, this thing works just fine after I've relieved this section right here. But, I really shouldn't have had to do that. All right, so let me wrap up with some final thoughts here. Look, it seems like I've been pretty hard on this grinder, and I guess I have, but, a grinder needs to do what it needs to do, and if you have to modify it substantially to get where it needs to be, there are only some people that are going to want to go to that trouble. I mean, the good news about this, as I said up top, is that, this is a very powerful motor here for, this budget range. The typical pro grinder is going to be a horse and a half to maybe even 3 horses. This is 1 horse. But what that means is that you're not constantly operating on the edge of stalling this thing out, which most budget grinders, frankly, they just aren't powerful enough for making knives. You can do it, but you're constantly riding this thing to try and not stall it. You really don't have to do that on here. It just grinds away, and you don't have to think about that. That is a really big deal. It's something that pays dividends for a long, long time. But you do have to get over these humps here. So I'll tell you a story. I've got this buddy, Michael, who I've played guitar with for a long time. And in his lifetime, he's probably owned 30 times as many guitars as I have. No lie. Every, 6 weeks or so, he goes to the guitar store, he takes in some guitar he owns, trades it in, and then he gets another guitar, and he fiddles around with it. He adds a pick guard, he changes the tuners, he adds new pickups, he just does stuff to it. He just enjoys tinkering with guitars. And then 6 weeks later, I go to his house and that guitar is gone and something else is hanging on the wall. So if you're like Michael, if you're one of those guys who just enjoys tinkering with the stuff that you own, this could be a fantastic grinder for you because, there's just so much potential here. But if you're the guy like me, I want to take something out of the box and start using it. And in that case, this is maybe not the perfect grinder for you. Bucktool makes a whole bunch of different grinders, and some of them that I would, say you can just take this right out of the box and use it. They're 2x42, for instance, is like that. But this one, not so much. So we've already talked about the table. That's a super easy fix. We've talked about the platen. That is not a super easy fix. For somebody like me that's got a mill, you know, it probably took me an hour. That's not a big deal. You know, you could do it with an angle grinder or something like that. Take a little more time. Probably won't be quite as perfect, but it's doable. But it's sort of a big deal. How about the speed? Speed is something that you can modify. You could put a VFD on here. Okay, so all that said, let's say you modify all this stuff. Is this going to, you know, compete with Ameribraids or you know, Wurtz's or these kind of high-end pro grinders? Absolutely not. But they literally cost 10 times as much money as this. 10 times as much. That is a big deal. For a lot of people, you know, the cost of getting into knife making is just a very, very tough hurdle. And so, you know, if you're willing to put some effort into it, this is a grinder that could really be good for you for quite a while. You know, a lot of people buy budget grinders and then, you know, about 10 minutes later, they're like, oh God, this thing just doesn't do, you know, it's just so frustrating to use. I got to spend more money on something nice. If you're willing to go through the effort, this has got more legs on it. You know, this is going to last a longer time before you want to upgrade to something more expensive. So like I said, you want to open the box and start grinding, not the machine for you. However, if you're like my buddy Michael and you're willing to spend some time and you actually maybe even enjoy that process of modding things and, you know, making them custom to you, this could be a fantastic deal for you. All right, guys, thanks for watching and keep on making those knives. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. You know, I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. WalterSorrellsBlades.com.